Hey guys, Retro Gaming Goth here, and I am back finally after a long break due to the pandemic. I know you might be thinking, what's pandemic got to do with you making homemade videos? Well, I have issues. That's all you need to know. I have issues. So anyway, I'm back with a brand new video today, and this time around, if any of you have seen any of my videos, they've mainly been about decks on Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist or Pokemon mainly recently. Whatever. The fact is, I'm here today, and I'm going to do something that I'm sure a lot of people have done. In fact, I know a lot of people have done, but this is a first for me. It's a deck review, and it's a deck review I think is one of the most iconic characters in the franchise of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's Raphael's deck. I think he is quite a classic character, to be fair, just for the simple reason that he actually beat Yugi at his own game. And not only that, he took advantage of the situation. He had, at the time, what was considered to be one of the most dangerous cards in the game, which was the Seal of Orichalcos. And Yami had the opportunity to take that card, and he did. He basically used his own strength and weakness against him in a way, because, you know, the Raphael's best card, trump card, so to speak, was actually the Seal of Orichalcos. But by making Yami, Yugi, Pharaoh, whatever you want to call him, by making him take that card from his own hand using, I believe it was the Exchange Magic card where they had to swap cards from each player's hand, Raphael seduced him into playing the Seal of Orichalcos during the duel, and thus doing so, Raphael was able to defeat him because obviously the dark powers of the Orichalcos was enough to overcome the Pharaoh's good spirit and corrupt him to a point where not only did the whole duel cost him the match, but it actually cost him to lose his best friend, which was his psychic Yugi, which we all know anyway. For those who've obviously seen the show and are a fan of the franchise. So I always thought to myself that Raphael was such an iconic character because he actually beat Yugi in a fair match. So with that being said, I've actually constructed a more up-to-date version of his deck. Now, we all know that Guardians are not at all the best of decks, without a shadow of a doubt, just because they require real additional support. But this deck, however, it's only featured mainly around Guardian Dreadscythe and Guardian Yatos, with obviously some other Guardian support, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. And it doesn't, I'll be honest with you, straight away, spoiler alert, it does not contain any of the other Guardian cards. The only Guardian cards you're probably going to see in this deck, based on Raphael, is Dreadscythe and Yatos. So if you're familiar with the deck, you'll know exactly which monsters I'm referring to, and they will not be featured in this deck review. However, with the more modern day, up-to-date style of cards, you will see a massive difference when it comes to the Guardian support, because, well, I'll just show you and you will understand where I'm coming from. So let's start this review off with 3 Dreadscythes. Now, I just want to point out that this entire deck is mainly featured around Yatos and Dreadscythe, for obvious reasons. Given the fact that Dreadscythe can only be summoned when the Yatos is destroyed, and when it is summoned, it can be equipped with the Reaper Scythe Magic card, which gives it 500 extra attack for every monster that's in both players' graveyard. Now, it already has a standing attack strength of 2500, but when equipped with the Reaper Scythe Magic card, it gains an additional 500 for every monster in the graveyard on both players, from both players. Sorry. So it does gain a massive huge attack strength, and it's not only that, it's also a resurrector. So every time it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can resurrect it. And I didn't actually realize this, but every time it's special summon, you can equip a Reaper Scythe card from the deck to the monster, and the cycle continues on. And with that being said, that's Dreadscythe. Quite a not the hard. It is one of those cards that is hard to play, but if you can get a Yatos straight away on the field with this card in your hand, you guarantee the real powerful monster, regardless. Next, we have 3 Guardian Yatos. As I explained previously, having this card on the field is mandatory. It's priority. It's also quite easy, quite known to mention that if you draw this card straight away, it can be special summoned from your hand to the field straight away without any tribute sacrifices, providing of course you have no monsters in your graveyard. And I think that's what makes the Eotos such a good card, because if you draw it straight away, you can just play it straight on the field. And if you've got Dread Scythe in your hand, if it's destroyed, it obviously lets you summon Dread Scythe. Next, the card which is ultimately, I think, the key card in this entire deck, and I'm going to explain why. Arsenal Summoner. Now, this card at the time was one of those cards where you had no choice. If you were going to play Guardians, you couldn't play any of the following which is stated on the card itself. You couldn't play this card with the following: Celtic Guardian, Winddragon Guardian of the Fortress, Part 1, Part 2, and Guardian of the Labyrinth. Or the Rebellion. What does that say? Basically another Guardian card. However, I have discovered recently, and I will show. I believe I actually have showed this in a video where I tried to I tried to battle a Tame, Yami, Yugi, again, whatever you want to call him. I'm just going to call him the Pharaoh, because that's what everyone commonly knows him as a Pharaoh. So, when I tried battling the Pharaoh, I actually didn't have all the necessary support for Guardians at the time, and I tried to defeat him with Dread Scythe and the Eotos, and because he ran Timaeus and Dark Magician with Eternal Soul and all the other support that Dark Magician recently had, this deck got very easily overpowered. However, I have noticed that also on Summer, it clearly states on the card that it can... so you can basically get a card from the deck that has Guardian in its name, as long as it's flipped. Now, there are a lot of cards now that actually have the word Guardian in the text, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And believe it or not, this card really does help with this deck, on the fact that, yeah, we know if once flipped, it can search for a deck for a card with Guardian in its name. Well, you can get Eotos, you can get Dread Scythe, and there's two other cards you can actually search for, which is in this deck, and I think it really does help. So this is mainly the key for the deck. Once flipped, you can get a Guardian card from the deck. And I'm going to show you very briefly in a moment which cards I'm referring to. Now, these next few monsters aren't necessarily how shall we say this? Put it this way, there are other cards in the world that could actually do a better job than these two, but I feel like for this deck, it's Raphael always played the same cards. You could see on them that they were very old, and he remained faithful to the cards in the deck. So these two, I think, would verify my point. So we have two Magician of Faiths and two Iron Blacksmith Kotetsu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. These cards are very supportful for the deck because Kotetsu lets you select the equip card from the deck and add it to the hand. Now, there's already a couple of equip cards in the deck, and it's paramount that you get them to your hand to help support the Guardians that are in this deck, and further monsters that's also in here. Magician of Faith, self-explanatory. Once flipped, you can equip a spell card. You can search, for a spell card that's in your graveyard and add it to your hand. There's not many monsters in this deck. There are a fair few more spell cards than monsters overall, and trap cards for that matter. So Magician of Faith is definitely a card you would need to run in this deck, for the obvious reason that you definitely need spell support in this. Now, these next two monsters, I'll be honest, I actually don't know why I put them in this deck. I just feel like that this deck is very structured deck based in contents of the fact that they're just there for the actual support, even though you probably don't necessarily need them, but they're there for convenience sake. And given the fact they were in the next fight between the Pharaoh and Raphael, I think it's only fair to put these in the deck just because of what they can do. So we have Curry Bandit and Electromagnetic Turtle. Now, Curry Bandit, if we're all familiar with Kuribos, we're all fans of Kuribo. During the affairs, when it's normal summon, you can send this card to the graveyard, well, tribute it, and excavate the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard, but add 1 card, spell or trap specifically, from your hand. to your hand. I really am getting these words wrong today. I do apologise. I do a lot of these videos live, so I don't actually have a script, so I just do them offhand. So if I do say anything wrong, I do apologise in advance. Anyway, as I said, you can do all that. And there's a lot of spell and trap support in this deck, and if you do excavate any monsters, it's not a big hit as long as you've got Eatos on the field before you play Curry Bandit. Because any spell or trap support that you draw after that is necessary. So, yeah, that's that. Electromagnetic Tool. I actually don't know why I've got this in this deck. I really don't. Oh, I suppose if I had any other reason, I think it's just because it's an extra monster, if anything. It can end the battle phase during your opponent's battle phase. Quick effect. Obviously, while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it, and it ends the battle phase straight away. So it is definitely a protective support against your life points and so on and so forth. So combine that with Curry Bandit. If this card literally sends this to the graveyard, you've got a good advantage because this card's in the graveyard. It protects you from battle damage, and you get a spell or trap, depending on what obviously Curry Bandit reveals from the top of your deck. So that's all we have for the monsters. Now for the spells. In the game, I actually do have 3 of these. I know you can only play one once per duel, but in the game, I feel like you've got to have 3 because it makes it very easy to summon Dreadscythe, and I'll explain why. And we all know this card by now. Seal of Orichalcos. Now, I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain this card, but for those of you I do need to explain it to, it gives all monsters 500 extra attack once per turn. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects, which is good because it protects all your weaker monsters based on the next ability, which is if you control 2 or more monsters, the monsters with the lowest attack cannot be attacked, but instead you have to attack. In a sense, you have to attack the higher monster first before you can attack the weaker one. But what does it for me is the second effect, the final effect. Excuse me. It destroys all special summon monsters that you control. Now, you could special summon Guardiatos with its own effect, then play Seal of Orichalcos, and this is why I said a minute ago, if you run 3 in a deck, it's very easy to play Yatos, play the Orichalcos, and then summon the Dreadscythe. Because it destroys the Yatos, and then if you've got Dreadscythe in your hand, you can just special summon it. And it's an instant 3k beater with immunity to destruction, providing you can discard a card from your hand, and Dreadscythe automatically gains an additional 500 attack because it equips itself with a Reaper Scythe magic card. Which is why I run 3 in 1 in the deck on the game, but unfortunately I don't have it in real life, so I can only showcase you 1. Besides, the card only limits you to play 1 anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. Then we have 3 Reaper Scythe, Dreadscythe. I think I already mentioned this card's effect enough time, so I don't need to bring it up now. Now, this next equip card, it took me a while, but I finally got it off a friend of mine, Jacob Sid. If you don't know him, by the way, before I show the card, if you don't know the guy, check him out. He's a real good friend of mine, and he does do some very unique and how should I say, very fun videos. So if you want to get a chance to watch him do so, I'm also on there. So if you're interested in seeing me and him on set doing wacky crap, go visit his site because he does them all on his channel because he's all editing his videos. Whereas me, I just straight in front of me, camera's there, deck's there, game's there, whatever, it's there. So, the next card, Power of the Guardians. Now, if you remember what I said a minute ago about Assault Summoners, Arsenal Summoners effect, you can search your deck for any Guardian card. Well, this card counts, and it's undoubtedly one of the best spell cards you could run in this deck. Given the fact that if a monster attack, if an attack is declared or an equipped monster, put it this way, I'll put it in my terms, if a monster attacks, or you attack, while this card is equipped to a monster, the monster that's equipped with this card gains 500 attack by placing a spell counter on that monster card, and it gains 500 attack. However, if the monster would be destroyed, you can remove a counter from this card, and your monster's protected from being destroyed. So that in itself is really good because you might not have Dreadscythe in your hand, but you've got Yatos on the field. You could protect it till end of days, or at the very least until Power of the Guardians is destroyed, or Yatos is somehow removed without being destroyed. This card is really good on the protective side of things, and it increases your monster's attack power. But imagine equipping this to Dreadscythe. It's already got immunity from destruction, providing you can discard a card from your hand and send it to the graveyard, and then special summon Dread Scythe, and then you can equip it with Reaper Scythe if you have enough. But then equip it with Power of the Guardians. It's got protection, destruction, protection, and it gives it an additional 500 attack from just being from just attacking or being attacked if a monster can overpower it, given how much attack power it's probably going to have by that point. This card is probably the key to safety for this deck, at least. Next on our list, we have Hidden Armories. We have 2 of these. It can basically let you search your deck for an equip card. And I'm going to be honest, the cards I just showed you were the only ones in this deck. So Hidden Armory is a card that you want to run to get your Power of the Guardian or Reaper Scythe from the deck or graveyard back to your hand. So that's that. Next on our list, you might be a bit surprised by this, but I'll explain very briefly as I can. Soul Release. Now, this deck is very up and down in terms of the fact that sometimes you might not have Eatos straight away in your hand, but you have other monsters, and the monsters all go to the graveyard, but then somehow you draw Eatos and you have Soul Release. Now, Eatos can always be special summoned if you have no monsters in the graveyard, which is why I have Soul Release. However, it contradicts the deck when you need monsters in the graveyard, because when Eatos goes to the graveyard and you summon Dread Scythe feeds from graveyards. So Soul Release basically removes all your monsters and potentially your opponents, if you choose to, depending on what deck they run. You might need to remove one of their monsters. However, Eatos can only be summoned if there's no monsters in your grave, which is why Soul Release is in this deck. And sometimes it can work on your opponent, but other than that, it does deplete your Dread Scythe's attack. But at the same time, it is a very useful card if, due to unforeseen circumstances, you actually have a graveyard full of monsters and you need to get rid of them to play Eatos. So so you can get Eatos to be, so you can have Eatos destroyed, just so you can play Dread Scythe. Right, I stumbled enough on that one, so I'm not playing that anymore. I'm not talking about that anymore. Then we have natural staple support spell cards. So for this, we have Swords of Revealing Light, because you never know when you might need to stall for a few turns just to get your field in place. What have you? 1 day apiece. Same ruling. Basically, draw an extra card. You don't take no damage for an entire turn. So it does help if you haven't drawn the card you need and you need this to help you. Monster Reborn. Well, the card in its name says what it does in its text. It basically revives a monster. So there you go. Now, it took me a while to get all this because due to pandemic, and yeah, I could have ordered this online, but I figured, you know what, eBay charged like £1 for everything, whereas the card's probably not worth anywhere near that, given its rarity and its status right now, of it being, from what I understand, potentially banned, but then I ain't seen the ban list for God knows how long. Soul Charge. I needed this card for this deck because it is Raphael, and the last card he played, he practically forfeited the duel by playing this spell card, which I think is a ruling in terms of duel monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh!, whichever you want to call it. If you want to call it by duel monsters, you're going by anime standards. If you want to call it Yu-Gi-Oh!, you call it by the typical today's standards. But by my knowledge, you can't play Soul Charge to commit suicide in a duel, because unless you have the life points required, you can't play a card that literally lowers your life points down to 0. And given the fact that Soul Charge literally can only do like the maximum of 5,000 life point cost, and if you don't have the life points, you really are not going to commit suicide. But Raphael did in the anime. So for that, well, obviously for that reason, I had to play Soul Charge. And again, it empties the graveyard if you want to play Eatos to destroy it, to then summon our Dread Scythe. So that's it for the spells. And now we have the traps. Now, this is literally the final Guardian card I mentioned in regards to Arsenal Summoner. Dimension Guardian. This card literally protects your monsters. Protects a single attack position monster from being destroyed by battle and by card effects. So, ideally, if you've noticed by this point, I play a lot of cards that prevents monsters from being destroyed, but at the same time, I want my monsters to be destroyed so they can summon out better monsters. But imagine you're playing out the duel, and you've got Eatos. The only way your opponent's going to get past you is if they get past Eatos, but if they get past Eatos, they've got to go up against Dread Scythe. and the overruling effect continues, you can't really get past any of the monsters without some sort of consequence, or you're going to run against a brick wall. You're never going to penetrate it until you hit its main weak points. And Dimension Guardian, Power of the Guardian, Guardian Dreadscythes, all their abilities are destruction proof with some minor consequences. Like I mentioned before, Dreadscythe can be destroyed, but you have to have cards in your hand for it to be resurrected. If you don't have cards in your hand, it is dead. Dimension Guardian, if this card's not on the field, the monster is no longer protected. Power of the Guardian, if it doesn't have counters, it can't protect your monster. But if you eliminate all of them, you've got a pretty solid field at your disposal. So that's Dimension Guardian. And for extra support, we have 2 Call of the Haunted. Self-explanatory, it's like Monster Reborn, but the trap version. For protection, we have 3 Wobokus. Because a lot of my other monsters, if I'm sure you've noticed by now, are flip effect monsters. And given the status of the Yatos, you don't want your monsters to die, but you need their flip effects. So with Woboku, it does attack. It allows your opponent to attack your monsters, but it also makes them flip up. But with Woboku, it prevents them from being destroyed. So you get all the privileges of the flip effects, but you get nothing of them being in the graveyard, which is a disadvantage in this case. So it's very Blade, all the strengths, no weaknesses. And finally, we have 2 Mirror Forces, just for protection and obviously destruction to your opponent's monsters if necessary. The deck is very overpowered with attack and protection if you can get to that point. But overall, you just need a bit of staple, and Mirror Force is one of the most perfect staple support cards of the game. So that's it, guys. That is my Yatos Dreadscythe Raphael deck of 2021. I hope you liked the video, and if you do like it, be sure to share, subscribe to my channel. And also, I've never mentioned this before, and it's been over a year for me to mention it. There's a little notification bell, I believe. So if you want to see more videos like this, please tap that notification bell, because I am intending on doing a lot more videos very soon, and I would very much like it if you guys could be a part of it by viewing them and liking them, subscribing them, sharing them, and mentioning to all your friends that I am the Retro Gaming Goth. I do play with a lot of old school stuff, because I believe retro obviously is old school but not outdated. However, it might be outdated to some, it's still carrying on and going strong to this day. So thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Take care.